Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the 1044, a new weekly webisode and podcast from the editors here at CCGA, Overdrive, and Truck Parts Service. I'm James Gillette, and my co host on the other end is Jason Cannon, editor of CCJ. We'll be hitting YouTube, social media, and your preferred podcast listening app every week with a new episode of the 1044. So go ahead and subscribe to CCJ's YouTube channel if you haven't already. Find us on Facebook. And you can find the 1044 in your favorite podcast app and subscribe there too. Though this very inaugural episode may not make it in time for our podcast feed on iTunes and some of the bigger platforms, but look us up and subscribe if you can. Jason, are you on duty or off duty, or can you even tell right now?
Man, I've not driven a truck since March, and that was a test drive of a Stone Ridge's mirror eye rear view camera system and a upfitted Cascadia. And really, if I would have known then what I know now, I think I would have relished in that experience a little bit more than what I did. Honestly, I wished I could sell some of my unused drive time like some of these manufacturers do with emissions credits. And if I could have done that, I could have retired in August.
Well, to that end, once again, our first topic of the day here is hours of service. And I can't say I'm surprised necessarily, even though we did our best on CCJ and Overdrive to try to cover those as best we could and make sense of them for readers over the past few months. But we've had a lot of comments and questions still pouring in about the new hours of service regs. Still seems to be a lot of confusion out there, and it seems to be compounded by the fact that several major ELD suppliers have struggled out of the gate to get their software to jive with the new regulations. We've heard that from both readers and we've heard that from the ELD suppliers themselves. About half a dozen or so of the vendors that we've reached out to said they had a couple issues out of the gate, and they've had to issue some software patches to update their logging apps based on how drivers were using the new regulations that are available. And I think, like a lot of other regulations we've seen over the years, there's kind of that very initial adjustment period, kind of like what we saw with the ELD mandate when it took effect in December of 2017, and then the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse earlier this year. There was that initial surge of registrants and users that took about a month to resolve itself. And then with all these regulations, it always seems like everyone settles into whatever the new normal is. But it's really those split sleeper options that seem to be causing a ruckus right now. That's the 5 on, 4 off, 6 on, 7 off. It can get confusing.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like math, and I was told there would be no math. Can you imagine having to take your SATs every 14 hours just to fill out your logbook or your ELD?
Yeah, some of these scenarios I've been getting in the emails sound like written math problems from grade school. If a truck leaves Washington State at 65 miles per hour on Tuesday and another one leaves San Antonio on Wednesday morning, when will the two drivers cross paths at Love's in Omaha?
Yeah, it's really interesting. As fundamental as the ELD is now to trucking, it's basically like an accountant using a calculator. But it's clear that a lot of drivers, for whatever reasons, they struggle with it. Form and manner and log not current violations, they make up about 25% of all driver violations at roadside. And that's not equipment violations like your tires, your lights, and your brakes. It's driver violations. There's 22 ELD related violations that count against the SMS scores. And form and manner and log not current are the leading driver violations by a wide margin. Form and manner violations just one CSA point, but the log, if the log's not current, that's worth 5. So you consider this scenario where your driver maybe runs a red light, and when he gets pulled over, the officer notices that the ELD's not current. Well, you just accumulated 10 points out of 2 incidents, and your paycheck's going to be a little light over something like that. Changes like this are never easy. We've been through things similar to this. This is sort of a fundamental change more so than it is a shift, and that can be scary. You often hear drivers talk about, this is a profession. They're professional drivers. This is a profession, and professionals learn to roll with the punches, and they learn how to make them advantageous. And regardless of how much you hate the rules, you can either work with them or you can be smothered by them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Jason. And listeners out there on all this, you can find reporting on Overdrive and CCJ. Check it out. We've got ongoing reporting about the snafus with ELDs and all the changes with hours of service regs on ccjdigital.com and overdriveonline.com. Well, that was our main topic this week. Now diving into a few quick hitting items here. Jason, trailer orders were through the roof for that was September, right? Tell us about what's going on with trailer orders and kind of what that tells us about fleets and their buying habits right now.
Well, truck and trailer orders have been trending upward for a few months, but they were both particularly strong in September. September was the third highest month on record for trailer orders, and truck orders hit their highest point in about 2 years. What we're seeing right now is a little boost in consumer confidence, which leads to a little bit better spending. And there's also some pent up demand in the equipment orders because those sort of sank between March and say May, and replacement demand has now come roaring back. And there's also some fleet expansion in there. Capacity in certain segments is a little tight right now, so carriers are stocking up on whatever assets they can get to try to get a larger share of that pie. And speaking of pie, and James, this really has nothing to do with pie. I just couldn't think of a cool segue. It's time for
Yep.
our mailbag. So, we've got this first question up. This came in recently, and this one's for you, James. What's the latest on glider kit regulations, and are gliders officially dead? I know that was gliders were a huge topic of conversation several years ago, and they're just kind of gone. So, what's going on?
Yeah, so that's exactly right, Jason. It was a huge topic in 2017 and 2018, really. And then of late, there hasn't been a lot to cover, and so maybe that's why they've fallen out of the news cycle. But basically, the Phase 2 regulations that were put in right at the end of President Obama's term really put an end to the glider kit manufacturing business as we knew it. It capped glider builders like Fitzgerald's, and there were a few other names out there. Fitzgerald's obviously had one of the bigger names in the market. They are now capped at just 300 builds a year. To put that in perspective, Fitzgerald, around the time those rules took effect in late 2016, were manufacturing around 8 or 10,000 gliders a year. So you can see that really undercut their business to a severe degree. And those manufacturers like Fitzgerald's and the others tried to put up a fight against the regulations when they came down. And I think they found some sympathetic personnel at the EPA. And EPA, in Trump's first year of his presidency, put out a proposed rule to explicitly give glider makers an exemption of the Phase 2 regulations that were put into effect in 2016. But eventually that rule died due to some personnel shakeups at the EPA and some ethical issues surrounding the research the EPA was using to justify repealing those glider kit regulations. And so I'll refer everybody to our reporting that we did in 2018 and 2019 on Overdrive and CCJ. You can go to overdriveonline.com and search glider to find those stories. But it was quite a dramatic saga there for a little while with all the back and forth with EPA and the glider kit makers and then other parties in the industry who were saying, like, we have to comply with these regulations. The glider kit makers should as well. Then obviously you always have the environmentalists coming in and making their case, like Public Citizen and those types. And even the Office of Inspector General at EPA got involved at the request of Congress to try to help referee and sort it all out. So in short, gliders are much more of a rare commodity these days due to those regulations. Owner-operators and fleets can still build their own glider kits. That's perfectly okay, just as long as they don't build more than 300 in a year. So that's the lay of the land on gliders. Jason, continuing mailbag here. Here's a question for you. If self-driving technologies are supposed to be safer, why did FMCSA decline Pronto.ai's recent hours of service exemption?
That's a really good question. First off, what Pronto was asking for is that drivers that were using the company's co-pilot driver assist system be allowed to drive up to 13 hours during a period of 15 consecutive hours after coming on duty following 10 consecutive hours off duty. Again, we're back to the math. The FMCSA basically just said that they didn't see a significant net benefit to a potentially positive outcome during the requested period. And what that means is even if Pronto showed zero safety incidents during the extended drive time, which would be basically a best case scenario, the FMCSA was unlikely to determine that level of safety performance was tied directly to the ADAS system. I've not had the opportunity to drive Pronto's system yet. Guys, hit me up anytime. I'm super easy to find, and my CDL's getting cabin fever. But I am familiar with it, and I know what it does. And I absolutely think the ADOS systems like Pronto's and Detroit Assurance 5.0 and a host of others, that they absolutely can reduce driver fatigue and make driving safer. One of the goals of automated driving, and this is level 5, no human intervention, way down the road type stuff, but it's the potential to extend drive time. And the idea being that, by reducing some of that fatigue that and some of the mundane driving tasks, that the driver's more mentally fit for a longer period of time. But right now, FMCSA doesn't differentiate between somebody driving a 2021 tractor with the most advanced technology commercially available platform in the world versus a 1970s cab over without anti-lock brakes and power steering. So the safety factor between those two trucks, with the ability of the driver being equal, that's significant. But just using this denial as a benchmark, FMCSA is eventually going to have to be open to the idea of stretching drive times for the companies that work on this technology and the carriers who are willing to embrace it. Otherwise, there's not going to be a real good use case to go past level 2 autonomous, which is sort of where we are right now.
That's a pretty stark difference between that 2021 tractor you're talking about with all the safety assist systems built in, kind of baked in from the factory versus somebody driving like you said, a 1970s or 1980s rig that probably is a beast to handle up and down the highway. Time for a segment we're calling Roadside Attractions in honor of an old section in Overdrive that highlighted some of the lighter or otherwise weird news from the highway. And if you found, Jason, you found something funny, if not somewhat morbid, that was put out by Lytics last week, and it's about roadkill and the COVID-19 pandemic. One would think that the roadkill numbers would be down because traffic took such a hit in March, April, and May, but Lytics says that's not true. What you got on that front?
God bless the people at Lytics. I think that when the pandemic took millions of trucks off the highway, various animals decided it was finally safe to cross the road. And man, they were wrong. Lytics analyzed some data from its onboard camera systems across its million plus network of trucks. And that data showed that animal fatalities increased between March and August through the COVID-19 fears that were keeping basically everybody at home, and transportation trips were down about 30%. Interestingly enough, the highest roadkill increases were in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and all those states are sort of connected right there. And they're all fairly rural areas where the lack of truck traffic emboldens some of these animals to venture out a little further on the roads. So, James, Florida, what do you think animal was the most susceptible to roadkill in Florida? I mean, it's got to be an alligator, right?
Look, the thought of a Class 8 truck or trailer rolling over an alligator somewhere kind of makes me want to lose my lunch, but I don't think you're wrong on that. In Florida, could very well be an alligator. And hey, down in Florida, it could be anything. It's like a haven for exotic pets and escaped exotic pets, apparently. I saw a headline this week about a record-breaking python snake being found somewhere in Florida. And those obviously are not indigenous. People bring them in as pets, and apparently it's become something of a problem from what I've read. Hey, if you're a trucker out there and you frequent Florida or anywhere else for that matter that might have strange animals and you've seen one along the highway, please hit us up with the strangest animal you've seen while you're traveling out there at 1044trucking@gmail.com. That's 1044trucking@gmail.com. And if you send us a note with a weird animal you've seen on the highway, we will mention you in next week's episode. Well, that's the first edition of the 1044 in the books. Hit us with your mailbag questions at 1044trucking@gmail.com. Again, that's 1044trucking@gmail.com with your questions and feedback. Jason, CCJ Solutions Summit is next week. Are there still slots available for fleets that want to attend that?
This year it's a virtual event, so it's actually CCJ Virtual Solutions. We're in this whole Zoom economy, the Zoom reality now. But yeah, there are slots available, but you got to hurry. It kicks off Monday morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to have a sort of an overview and an election outlook. What would happen in a Biden world? What would happen in the continuation of a Trump world? That's Monday's big topic. There's a couple topics on Tuesday. The Tuesday kicks off at 10, then there's another session at 2, and we continue that cadence Wednesday and Thursday. Registration, if you are the trucker who can send us a picture of the Python in Florida, your registration is free. The good news is if you're not that person, your registration is also free because everybody's registration is free. So ccjvirtualsolutions.com, all you have to do is give us your name. We'll send you a link to how to log in. It's pretty easy. It'll all be conducted over Zoom. We expect most sessions to last right at an hour or less. We're going to talk a little bit of maintenance. We're going to talk a little bit of electrification. We're going to talk a little bit about driver recruiting and retention. And obviously, I've already covered, we're going to talk about the election prospectus. So it'll be a 4 days information-packed week next week. Hope to see everybody there.
Yeah, should be cool. Should be cool. And hey, if you're a trucker and you have a photo of a Python from your rig, we will bring you on the 1044 for your very own episode. So, all right, everybody, take care and stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.